Welcome to the video for the 9th chapter of the Cambridge Introduction to Sanskrit, which is going to introduce you to long A stems. Let's begin by reminding ourselves of some basics. All Sanskrit nouns express the same grammatical categories. All can express 8 cases and 3 numbers. Each noun has a grammatical gender. But there are several sets of endings with which nouns can express these categories. So, for example, there are several different endings for expressing an accusative singular or an instrumental plural, and so on. Which set of endings is used depends on the stem final sound of a noun, so depends on the sound at the end of a noun stem. And what we will be looking at here are the endings of nouns whose stem ends in long A. What you see here is the list of all the forms of a long A stem noun, specifically the word sena, meaning army. Now, long A stem nouns are always feminine, but remember that feminine does not automatically mean female. Feminine is a grammatical category, and so sena is grammatically feminine, even though sena does not refer to a female living being. Let's start by looking at the singular forms. You can see that we here have a set of forms that is quite different from the short A stem case endings that we already know. So what we here have is sena, sene, senam, senaya, senayai, senayach, senayach, senayam. So there's a lot of long A in an A stem noun, in the nominative singular, in the accusative singular. In the dative, the ablative, the genitive, and the locative, we have all sena, then plus our endings. So what you need to do to memorize these forms is to remember that there is a lot of a, and then basically to either recite them, as you may have done with the short A stem list of forms, or to go to the flashcards on the Brainscape site to learn the forms individually, and so on. Note, in the instrumental, we don't have sena as the stem, but we have sena to give us sena, ya. And so once more, the singular is sena, sene, senam, sena, ya, senayai, senayach, senayach, senayam. Now, in the dual, we have the same situation as with short A stem nouns, namely that we have the same cases for nominative, vocative, accusative, for instrumental, dative, and ablative, and for genitive and locative. The dual nominative, vocative, accusative has the same ending as we also found in the neuter of short A stem nouns. So there we had, for example, mitre. Here we have sene. So that's a bit of overlap that may help you remember these forms. The rest of the cases in the dual, having the endings a, bjam, and a, yoch, are exactly what you already know from short A stem nouns, so that is going to be fairly simple to remember. Then in the plural, we continue with some overlap with short A stem nouns. In the nominative, vocative, and accusative, we have the form senach, so with a, long a, and visarga. Then we have a form or an ending that we haven't encountered yet, senabich. Remember, in short A stem nouns, the ending was eich, nareich, mitreich, and so on. Here we've got something different, senabich, so that needs to be memorized. Then we have senabiach, with an ending that we already know. Remember, we had narebiach in the dative and ablative plural. Here we have senabiach. Then in the genitive plural, we have senanam, again parallel to what we already know from narano, mitrano, wanano, and so on. And then finally in the locative, we have senasu. And here we have an ending that is at least similar to what we've already seen. In nareshu or waneshu, we had the ending shu. And here we have the very similar ending su. So that should hopefully not be too difficult to memorize. So the plural would be senach, 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 senabich, senabiach, senabiach, senanam, senasu. As was also mentioned in chapter 6, most adjectives whose masculine and neuter forms are short A stems have long A stems as their feminine forms. And so of the adjective priya, meaning dear, we would have the masculine forms priyach, priya, priyam, just like narach. The neuter forms priyam, priya, priyam, declined just like vanam. And the feminine forms priya, priye, priyam, and so on. So just like the forms of long A-stem nouns. A few more things to do with adjectives. Sanskrit adjectives, just like their English counterparts, have so-called comparatives and superlatives. So, for example, English good, better, best, or beautiful, more beautiful, most beautiful. The main way of forming comparatives and superlatives in Sanskrit is to take the stem of the adjective and to add tara in the comparative and tama in the superlative. So, for example, of ugra, meaning terrible, we have a comparative ugratara, more terrible, and a superlative ugratama, most terrible. There also is an alternative way of forming comparatives and superlatives that you can see here in the case of priya, where you have the comparative priyas, meaning dearer, and the superlative preshta, meaning dearest. This way of forming comparative and superlative is irregular. You cannot predict exactly what these forms are going to look like. And also it is much rarer than the tara-tama method, and therefore we are not going to look at it in detail now, but these forms are going to be introduced in chapter 35. As for the use of comparatives and superlatives, superlative forms are often employed together with nouns in the genitive or locative to express something like ugratamach naranam, the most horrible of men, or alternatively ugratamach nareshu, the most horrible among men, both expressing more or less the same idea. Comparatives, on the other hand, stand together with a noun in the ablative to express the idea of more something than something else. So, for example, singhach ashwat shigratarach. Singhach, the lion, shigratarach, faster, is the comparative of shigra, meaning fast. Ashwat, than the horse. The lion is faster than the horse. The idea of than something will in Sanskrit be expressed by means of a noun in the ablative. On the basis of adjectives, we can also form adverbs. An adverb is a word that qualifies or describes a verb. So, for example, she left quietly, they laughed happily. In English, adverbs are formed by taking adjectives and adding ly. So, for example, quiet, quietly, happy, happily, and so on. In Sanskrit, you form adverbs by taking the accusative, singular, neuter form of an adjective. So, for example, from shigra, meaning swift or fast, you get the adverb shigram, quickly or swiftly. From priya, meaning dear, you get priyam, meaning dearly. From nitya, meaning eternal, you get nityam, eternally or forever, and so on. When you see one of these forms in a sentence, it's the context that will help you determine whether you are looking at an adverb or actually at an accusative singular neuter adjective. Formally, they're identical. It's the words around them, the rest of the sentence that they're in, that will tell you which one you're looking at. Sanskrit actually also forms adverbs of nouns. So, for example, nama would be an accusative singular form of the word for name. And nama, this adverb, means by name or called or namely. And rahas, another accusative singular neuter noun, means in secret or secretly. And this is based on a noun meaning secret or also darkness, secrecy. Finally, to round this chapter off, let's look at some more internal sandhi, and specifically at the rukhi rule, which describes a pronunciation change that happens after rukhi, i.e. after the sounds R, U, K, and I. And this rule says the following: immediately after A, K, or any vowel other than A or A, S turns into sh, so the dental S turns into a retroflex sh. This happens even if the vowel is not immediately followed by S, but we actually have an anuswara or a visarga intervening between the vowel and the S. And it happens unless the S stands at the end of a word, because if an S stands at the end of a word, it just changes into a visarga. or unless the S is followed by an R. If that's the case, the R in a way protects the S from any of those changes. So immediately after R, K, or any vowel other than A or R, S turns into sh. We've actually seen examples of this already, namely in the long A stem locative plural, senasu. We've seen this ending su, but in the short A stem locative plural, nareshu, we've seen a very similar ending, namely shu. And actually underlying both of these forms is the same ending, namely su. But in senasu, the su remains as it is because the vowel that precedes is a. In nareshu, on the other hand, su has changed into shu because the vowel that precedes is a vowel other than a or a, namely e. An example of this change happening even though there is an intervening anuswara or visarga can be seen in manachsu versus danuchshu. Manachsu means in mines, danuchshu means in bows, as in bow and arrow. In manachsu, the ending su remains as su because the vowel that precedes is an a, whereas in danuchshu, the su turns into shu because there is a preceding vowel u, and this change happens even though there is a visarga between the u and the s. That was it for this chapter. We hope that you found this video helpful, and if you have any comments or suggestions, we would love to hear from you. Please do write to us at rupal@cambridge-sanskrit.org. And now, for your own work on this material, good luck and have fun!